All right, Isaiah chapter 6. And as always, God is amazing, but especially in this chapter that starts out with Isaiah's vision of God in the year King Uzziah died, giving us a historical reference for the timing of this prophecy and where it fits in the prophecies he's offered up to now. And let's go ahead and title this one Me, because there are two me's that are going to seem to stand out, at least two me in this chapter, where he begins in verse 1. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. As he will go on to describe his vision of God in the first 3 verses or so, then he will go on to talk about the way God left an impression on him, moving him to confess, the famous confession that, woe is me, verse 5, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. He thinks he's going to die, going back to the old provision from the law, stating that no one can see God and live. He is not only confronted with his vision of God, but what his vision of God exposes in his own unrighteousness, a confession that we could all make if we looked closely enough in the mirror. However, Isaiah is not going to linger there. An angel or a seraphim is going to atone for his sin by taking a coal from the altar, touching his lips with it, and letting him know his sin is atoned for. Not being content to receive that atonement in verses 6 and 7, he is going to move on in verses 8 through 10 roughly, and basically answer a call to make good on his appreciation for the second chance that he's been given. And so God is going to ask a famous question saying, who will go for us? And that will open us up to that more famous me of the two me's in verse 8, where he will say, here am I, send me. That being the second me. The first one I kind of glanced over, where he responds to God and seeing him by saying, woe is me. But the chapter will continue because it's not enough just to step up. God is going to actually give him something to say. Beginning in verse 9, actually, it will say, go and say to this people, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull and their ears heavy and their eyes blind, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts and turn and be healed. It's hard not to try to preach that passage because it is a famous passage filled with meaning, so much meaning that you'll even see it quoted by Jesus when he is trying to impress upon Israel years later the way in which they are still in this same condition, even during his ministry. The frightening part of the passage, both in Isaiah's day and in Jesus' day, may be in the following verses where Isaiah is going to say, how long, Lord? And he is going to respond, or God is going to respond, until the cities lie waste in verse 11, without inhabitant, and houses without people, and the land is a desolate waste. Going on to the end of the chapter, talking about something we have seen before, and that is the concept of the remnant, which we won't literally see come up until chapter 10, but we are seeing images of the remnant coming up in chapters leading up to chapter 10, this time in the form of a stump, a metaphor of a tree that has been cut down, only leaving a stump remaining. The last verse in the chapter literally saying, the holy seed is its stump. And I have a footnote that says the holy offspring, making it clear that it could be the Christ, someone we will clearly see referenced in chapters 9 and 11, but quite possibly talking about, once again, the remnant of Israel as well. I will leave it up to you to decide which you believe it is, because I don't know. But the more frightening part of the passage that caught my attention is the way in which Isaiah's commission is not so much to preach to persuade Judah as much as it is to preach to seal their fate or their condemnation. Understanding that likewise, even though Jesus seemed to be commissioned to seek and save that which is lost, he would also be a cause of stumbling for those who would not seek out the truth in what he was saying. Similar to what you will see in the next chapter, as God describing to Isaiah what God himself will become to those in Judah who refuse to listen to him, as chapter 8, verse 15 will say, and many shall stumble on it. They shall fall and be broken. They shall be snared and taken. Reminding me that there was no exception made for Isaiah. he could have ended up with the very same fate, stumbling, if he had not been honest enough to say, "Woe is me." Reminding me in life of the times in which we can be tempted to stumble by picking easy comparisons, when understanding that God is the comparison that we should use for our lives, we often pick more favorable comparisons between what we see in ourselves and what we see in others. Reminding me of the way I have heard it sometimes said that as men, we like to pick fights we think we can win. And while winning favorable matchups may impress people, it doesn't impress God. And so Isaiah's wisdom here is likely wisdom that can help us all. Understanding that if he was going to move forward effectively in his ministry and in his life, he was going to need God's help in both seeing and repairing the places in his life that caused him to genuinely say, "Woe is me."